I want to take you to another part of the world where indigenous people have been living for a long time, and their discovery was one of the great tragedies of the world. I refer to South America, Central America, and North America. Now, it's quite amazing that until about 500 years ago, half the world did not know the other half existed. It is difficult to believe that until 1492, that's about 500 years ago, one half of the world had no idea that the other half existed. And if we look at the human civilization to be 10,000 years old, that means 95% of the human time, we did not know the other half. Only last 5% of the time. That's quite remarkable. And this discovery happened quite by incidence, quite by chance. And it started in 1492, when Columbus sailed from Spain. He thought he was going to India. And he was quite certain that because the earth is round, he told his cartographers and convinced the king of Spain that it will take him no more than 17 days. 15 to 17 days, that was the estimate. So he started out and he sailed for more than 2 months, 60 days. And everybody was on the ship was getting worried. Food was running out. And the people on the ship were getting rebellious. There is no land to be seen. So finally, on the 13th of October, they saw the land. And they thought they have arrived in India. And they started calling those people Indians. And this is the greatest misnomer in all of human history that has persisted to this day, Indians. Now for me, I made my own discovery about Indians. And as you know, there is a story about Isaac Newton, the great scientist. And the story is that one day he was sitting under a tree and an apple fell on his head. And it's the beginning of discovery of the law of gravitation. Now, if the story is true or not, I'm not sure. As a historian of science, I'm not quite sure it's true. But nevertheless, it's a good story. Now, it happened to me when I went to Canada at the age of 21 to study. Just a few days later, I was at a student gathering. And most of the people in this gathering were not Indians. Hardly there was any Indian. They were white people, white kids. And when they discovered I was from India, I was an Indian, one person says to the other, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. The only good Indian is a dead Indian. It shocked me. I didn't know what it meant. I said, why would be a dead Indian a good Indian? And so I discovered that really until not too long ago, Indians were hunted away. People of South America, Central America, they were seen no different than animals. And so if you catch an animal, and if an animal is ferocious, and if you kill him, of course it's a good thing, you hunt it. So that's how I discovered what Indian meant to me. And since then, since last 40 years or so, since then, I have been really obsessed with this question as an ethical question, as a religious question, as a biological question. What is it that distinguishes a self from non-self, a person from the other? And that is the topic of my presentation today, the self from the non-self. What is it that defines a self? Because as I said, it is really a fundamental question in philosophy. Where does our human boundary finish and something else starts? In terms of mind, in terms of skin, in terms of being, in terms of culture, and so on. Because really, if we think the other, a stranger, the other could be your child, could be a member of the family, member of the tribe, he could or she could be an enemy, a person who cannot trust, so you have a kafir. So all kinds of things like this are part of what defines the other. And in some ways, human history has always been defined by these terms. Who is me And who is part of my family, who is member of my tribe, and who's the other? And the other, can I trust? And what makes the other? Sometimes the other is defined because he or she is of a different race. She's black, I'm white, she's yellow, I'm Indian, I'm Egyptian, and so on. Or it could be a different ethnicity. Or it could be a different language. Or it could be just a different tribe in another 15, 20, 30, 50 kilometers away. So there are many ways of defining the other. And sometimes you make connections with the other. And really until about the end of the Second World War, about 1945. So much, because there were so many colonies in the world. There were so many imperial powers had made colonies in Asia and Africa and so many other parts of the world. So we were engaged, many people were engaged, I was not engaged, but many others were engaged in war of independence. Now we have moved from just notion of independence to interdependence. And I will come to those questions because in a way, the other, what is the other, is being redefined. And I will come to mention some of these. Now, there are certain terms which are crucial to biology and to our religious and metaphysical and philosophical thought. And one term is the concept of sahanubhuti, sympathy, hamdardi, the other person, that I am in sympathy with this situation, this idea, this person, this tribe. And really even a greater step is called, is empathy. You feel as the other is like you, is very much like you. And this runs very, very deep. There is a beautiful couplet by Sant Kabir. So कहते हैं कबीरा सोई पीर है जो जाने पर पीर. वो पीर, who is a holy man who understands others' pain. कबीरा सोई पीर है जो जाने पर पीर. वो जो जानत नहीं पीर वो काफिर बेपीर. वो काफिर है. काफिर कौन है? जो दूसरी की पीड़ा नहीं जानता, जो who does not understand the other's pain. So really, and this one can mention in all religious traditions, this idea, who is the other and who is me? And where does this boundary start? So I mentioned this because really so many times this idea of imperialism, domination, control, that embedded in the other person because of race, because of ethnicity, because of status, because of class, because of social status, because of money, because of education or language, you make the other different from you. Now, coming back to Columbus. When Columbus arrived in 1492, this 1492 is a very special year in the history of mankind. And it is especially so in the history of Spain. Because that year, three momentous things happened, all quite by chance. First, of course, the discovery of the New World. They call this the discovery, because as I said, we didn't know that this huge 2 continents existed there. The huge continents, South America and North America. And so when he discovered this, so this is one event happened, the discovery of the New World. Second event was very crucial to the history of Europe and particularly of Spain. In 1492 is the end of Islam in Spain. Muslims ended they were there for 500 years. And they were fighting with the Christians. There were many mosques, they still exist in Spain, and they're fighting, dominating, fighting back and forth. But in 1492, Islam came to an end in Spain. It was a very important year. If you talk to any historian of Islam, they'll tell you what a tragic year it was for them. The third thing that happened, the third thing very crucial to Spain that happened, it's also the end of Jews in Spain. Jews had lived in Spain for centuries, and they were exiled from Spain. So you get out from here. And either the only way you can stay on here, either you become Christians or you get out from here. Many left, some became Christians, and it's an incredible story, what happened to them. So 3 important things happened. I say in the history of ideas that there are 3 kinds of others that were created in 1 year. That year, discovery of these new people in the new world, and then the discovery of these people who became enemies, who had been enemies, they were made others. They're different, not from us. And then the Jews were made into others. 3 kinds of othering that took place in 1 year, in 1 period. Now, when Columbus arrived in Spain, what is important is that his assignment was to find gold and find slaves and find converts who could become Christians. Very crucial, very important. When they arrived, the question that went on, that the people that they have discovered, these Indians, not our kind of Indian, those kind of Indians, that the people they had discovered, are they human? Are they human? And if they're not human, how can you make them into Christians? I'm not exaggerating here. This debate went on in the Vatican, in the Catholic Church, for 55 years. Are they human? And it was only 1552, through a papal bull in Vatican, it was decided, yes, they are human. And therefore you can make them into Christians. Otherwise, the question that really is, if they are not human, how can you make them into Christians? And if they are human, how can we treat them so inhumanly? Because they were treated inhumanly on a grand scale, very grand scale. Now, there are 3 or 4 things happen. And since our time is limited, I can't give a huge lecture here. So 3 or 4 things happened. Certainly, firstly, they were exterminated through war. Because as the more and more Spaniards came, and it's not Columbus was just coming in few numbers, that many more came, and then they're discovering more. They discovered there's a huge, incredible civilization existed in South America. There was Incas, there was Aztec, there were Mayas, there were amazing civilization that existed. We didn't know about it. Nobody knew about them in Asia or in Europe, but they existed, and many of them had made incredible achievements. For instance, I saw one exhibition called The Gold of Incas. Incas were also obsessed with gold. Almost all countries have been obsessed with gold. They were obsessed with gold, and they made some amazing jewelry. But the Spaniards were not interested in their jewelry, their art. They were interested in just gold. So they melted gold. They took over their beautiful jewelry, only little bit are left now. I saw an exhibition of what was left. And so otherwise they melted it away and took it away to Spain in tons. So the idea of discovering these people who could be made into Christians, and then discovering gold, and then expanding farther and farther into Central America and other parts of North America and so on. Now, I bring this up because they were exterminated in the large numbers. How were they exterminated? Of warfare. But the thing that killed them, far more than even the war, were diseases that came from Europe. Smallpox, plagues. So when people meet each other, they come in contact with each other. It's not just culture as we think of culture. It's not just languages being imposed. You bring your biology with you. You bring certain bodies are, of course, as if you live in Odisha, your bodies, your makeup is conditioned by what your certain immunity exists to certain diseases. So when people went from Spain and later on from Portugal and later on from Germany and Sweden and Norway and France and England and so on, many Europeans came, and later on the black people were brought in there as slaves. So as a lot of other people came, they found that the local people, the indigenous population, the Indian population, they were not immune to diseases. So they died literally by millions. So you see, there was warfare, this kind, and the second was their destruction through diseases for which they were not immune. Now, we are not immune only in body, but also sometimes we're immune to in our minds. Because we say certain things we do, we know how to cope with it. There is a resilience. Each culture has a resilience. And that can also be destroyed. Now, the third thing that happened later on, because it's a long history, because they're now 500 years. And just in 1592, there was a celebration. In some parts, it was a celebration. Other parts, it was a mourning. There is a tragedy, great tragedy. It was a Holocaust. It's a decimation of literally millions of people. So it can't be a celebration of the new discovery of the new world. It was a destruction of the new world. So during that time, they find that other ways is putting them into remote corners of various settlements. So you stay here. These are your reserves. You stay here, only put insert. So these are apartheid reserves. And what was called, a term which now we use, at that time wasn't used, ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. You clean your own tribe by keeping the others away from you. That's what the South America did, the white people did to the black people. That's what happened in the Baltic Wars in 1990s. So you cleanse your tribe by keeping the others away from you, or killing them, or putting literally a wall around them. So this happened on a grand scale. I will mention only two parts of the world which some people don't know about. California is one of the amazing parts of the world. Very rich, very wonderful. Okay, I got to sum it up. Very wonderful part of the world. But California was annexed by the Americans from Mexico. It was part of Mexico. It was taken away. And the people who were treated worse in any part of the world were the Indians in California. So much so in 2008, an apology, an official apology was expressed to them for the treatment that was meted out to them. And same with the second part of USA, this huge state is state of Texas. That too was part of Mexico. It was annexed from Mexico, these two grand big states. Now in context of Canada, because that's where I live. In Canada, something happened in cultural assimilation, that so many people of Indian origin were thought to be that they're not civilized. They're not civilized. This word civilization is a very loaded word. We think, we know what civilized means, and the other is not civilized. They're barbaric, they're savages. So in order to civilize them, a lot of children from parents of the Indian parents were taken away from them and put in residential schools. And these schools where the teachers were Catholic priests. And they were funded by the government, taught by the Catholic priests, and they were never to speak their language, only English. And they were also never to talk about their family or their background, how marriages are taking place, etc. All, whatever we define culture to be, that is not to be talked about. It is you're barbaric, we are civilizing you. And this went on for more than 150 years. And until 1996, just 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And so much so that what made it so barbaric from my point of view is that so many of these children who were there, they were sexually abused by the priests. Now there's been inquiry going on. I've been making some presentations called Truth and Reconciliation Commission, trying to say, what did you do to them? And so you express apologies and so on. So many countries in South America, whether it's in Mexico or in USA and Canada, now because of there is a new kind of ethos is emerging. And it's a good ethos. I feel hopeful about it. I feel very strongly that we are at the turning point in human history, turning point. But sometimes you can despair about certain things. I feel hopeful because I feel there is a new banquet table of history is being created. And what is this table? More and more people who have been marginalized, who have been left out, who have been at the fringe of things, whether they are women or tribal people or black people or disabled people, they are saying, I too need a place on the table of history, and that I've been denied this space. And so I see this happening more and more. And it's in this context, truly, that I see these various kinds of commissions being set up and apologies being expressed in various countries. Now, how sincere they are, how much they would mean. I have seen people cry in the Parliament of Canada, Indians, saying what you have done to me and to my grandchildren. So there is a great deal of sense. How do you reconcile with history? Something that was done to you 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and it is done, finished in some ways, but how do you reconcile with history and move on? Because ultimately life is to move on. And so these Truth and Reconciliation Commissions started in South America with the black people, but now similar commissions are being set up in many parts of the world. And really the attempt is to how to give a place to all human beings, because this dignity of man, dignity of humans is really at the core of really our concept of studying of folklore or mythology, because I think a new myth needs to be created that we humans are equal. We have equal dignity. Thank you.